Welcome to our Wednesday Wellness Show. My name is Dr. H. Kala Hewlett, President of Back Pain and Sciatica Center of Texas, Houston Neuropathy Solutions, and Houston Stem Cell Solutions, and I'll be your host for today's show. Our goal in doing this show is to bring valuable health tips and information that you can apply immediately from leading health experts in various fields of health and nutrition, especially as we find ourselves at home more and more than ever in these weeks and months ahead. Before I get to today's guest, though, I'd like to share a news story that I just came across yesterday. This was from the New York Times, and it says, Americans are already too diseased to go back to work right now. The huge burden of obesity and other chronic conditions among people in the US puts most of us at direct risk. So it caught my attention. What do you mean we're too diseased to go back to work? And it was written by two medical doctors. One specializes in obesity and the other in infectious disease. And they go on to say that chronic health problems increase the likelihood of a bad outcome when exposed to a virus such as COVID-19. In Italy, 99% of the fatalities were people with pre-existing medical conditions, especially hypertension, commonly known as high blood pressure, which is very interesting. They also go on to say that today, more than 2 out of 3 adults have high body weight, and 42% have obesity, which makes us one of the fattest countries in the world. Almost 2 in 10 children have obesity. Now that fact I was not aware of. 2 in 10 children have obesity. It goes on to say excessive weight and the poor quality diet that causes it is strongly associated with insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, and other abnormalities that may lower immunity to viral respiratory infection or predispose to complications. What they found through studies is that the sicker we are, the more unhealthy we are, whether it's from obesity, diabetes, other inflammatory conditions, it lowers our immune system. And when we're exposed to a virus, whether it be COVID-19 or another type of virus, we're more likely to have a negative reaction that may require hospitalization or even death. That's why the title of the article was, "Are we too sick to go back to work?" And this one last part I found really interesting. It said only 12% of Americans over age 20 are considered metabolically healthy. So when you do the math, that means only 88% of Americans, let me rephrase that. 88% of Americans are unhealthy. 88% of Americans are unhealthy, which means they're either overweight, have high blood sugar, have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, right? Or they're taking medication. So a staggering fact, 88% of Americans are considered unhealthy, only 12% considered healthy. And so that's why we're doing this show. And that's the message we really need to get to our community is we need to work on getting healthier. The World Health Organization, the CDC, all these leading officials have already said, look, we can't stop this virus from spreading. It's out there. We can slow it down, but we can't stop it. And chances are every American will be exposed at some time in the weeks and months ahead to this virus. The question is, how healthy is your body today to handle the moment you're exposed? And so that's our message today. And that's why I'm excited to introduce to our guest. She's going to be teaching you how to improve your health today to improve your health tomorrow, as far as if and when you're exposed to that virus. So a little bit about our special guest today. At a time when people are spending more time at home, restaurants are closed, it means more meal preps, more dinners at home, more breakfast at home, more lunch at home. So going to the grocery store and meal planning has taken on a whole new meaning for many of us. Some love it. Others dread the thought of going to the grocery store. They dread the thought of coming up with ideas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So to help you navigate both the grocery store and meal planning, as well as healthy eating, our special guest today is a local health and nutrition expert. Now, a little bit about her. She is known as the ingredient guru. She is a holistic nutritionist and real food advocate who emphasizes a healthy lifestyle and eating whole foods. She's a popular speaker on how to navigate the grocery store's mammoth packaged food stock, decipher confusing food labels, and choose healthy convenience foods. She is associated with the National Association of Nutrition Professionals, the American Holistic Health Association, the American Association of Drugless Practitioners, the Society for Nutritional Education and Behavior, as well as a founding member of the Health and Wellness Business Association, and the author of multiple books, including Fast Fun Freezer Meals, Overcoming Sugar Addiction, Eating Out, Eating Healthy, and her most popular book, The Pantry Principle, How to Read Labels and Understand What's Really in Your Food. So introducing Miss Mira Dessy.
Hey, Dr. Hewlett, it's so nice to see you.
Thank you for joining us today. I know it's a unique time when we're having these webinars and meeting via computer. But for our audience today, tell us, how did you first get interested in healthy eating?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story because I thought I was eating healthy. I unfortunately developed some very significant health challenges, and I, up until that point, had thought that I was eating very healthy. I prepared a lot of our meals at home. We belonged to a farmer's market. I was raising my children, eating a lot of homemade foods. And there were still foods coming into the home, however, that were not great choices. So in my early 40s, I began to get progressively sicker until I got to a point where I literally was living my life on the sofa. I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs without lying on the top stair. Even if I was going to bed, like I had to just lie there and recover and then crawl to bed. I couldn't raise my hands over my arm without feeling like I was going to faint. And to make a long story very short, I ultimately wound up being diagnosed with a number of autoimmune disorders. And in the process of learning how to regain my health, discovered that it wasn't just what I was eating, it was what was in what I was eating that was making me sick. I believe there is a whole group of us out there that I refer to as the chemical canaries. We're the ones who are very sensitive to all of the additives and preservatives and chemicals and negative ingredients that provide no nutrition whatsoever. And so by removing those from my diet, I actually was able to regain my health. But in the process of doing so, realized that I also kind of needed to change careers and went back to school and became a certified nutrition educator and now lecture and teach across the country.
So this was a second career, almost a midlife shift where it's, hey, this is something valuable. How did you even discover that it was the chemicals? Tell us about that process. Was it on your own?
Yeah,
You worked with?
you know what? It's a really great story. So in the process of finding out all of these different autoimmune disorders, sadly, none of the doctors that I talked to ever talked to me about my food. And I was seeing them all. I had a gastroenterologist, a rheumatologist, a cardiologist, an endocrinologist. I mean, my joke was if there was an IST, I had it. But none of them talked to me about my food. At a certain point, I kind of had a mini blow up and wound up talking to my insurance company in a very angry tone. And I still, to this day, occasionally apologize to the woman who answered the phone because I was not very nice to her. But she offered me something called an executive checkup and sent me to the Cleveland Clinic, where I had this amazing process. An executive checkup is where you have a gateway doctor who manages your care, and they send you out to all the specialists. And every day, at the end of the day, everybody who's seen you all gathers together. And those doctors commit to being part of that process for however many days you're there. I was there for 4 days. And so they just kept adding to my team, and they all talk to each other, which I now know is the most important part of the process, because previously nobody was talking to each other. They made a few changes to my healthcare plan. They still didn't really talk to me about food, although now I know that the Cleveland Clinic has actually changed and has a whole functional setup there, and they do talk to people about food and how they're eating and everything else. But the most important thing they did for me was to empower me to realize that I needed to stop being so passive about my own healthcare, and I needed to really speak up. At the same time, when I came back, a friend of mine gave me a book that talked about the impact of artificial colors on neurotransmitter health. And that kind of opened my eyes, because I'm reading this book and reading some of the things that are in there. And then I started rummaging through my pantry and realized that we not only had artificial colors, because I was looking at a section of the label that I had never considered before, which was the ingredient panel. Most people, when they look at a food label, they look at the top. They're like, how many calories does it have? How much fat does it have? If they're worried about their sodium, if they're worried about their sugar, and that's pretty much it. And there was this whole other section. I'm like, what is that? Like, what is that ingredient? And that turned into a mission to clean up my pantry. And in the process of doing that, other people began to ask me questions. And that's ultimately what led me to go back to school. And then from there to write my book.
So in writing a book, I wrote a book several years back, and it's a lot of time and energy.
Mm-hmm.
And you've not only written one book, but you have, I think, over 10 books at this time in various formats, both hard copy and ebooks that you've written. Tell us a little bit about that process of the different books you've written and labels.
Yeah. So a couple of my books do have to do with other aspects of wellness. So I have one called Beyond Meditation, Making Mindfulness Accessible for Everyone. And that's because we are more than just what we eat or how we exercise or, all these different things. We are these whole beings, and there's all these different aspects to us. And right now, especially learning how to calm down and reduce our stress is really important. But that, in addition to the pantry principle, in addition to eating out, eating healthy, fast, fun freezer meals, those all essentially came out of the work that I was doing with people. It was about solving real issues. As a mom who had 3 kids who all had different activities, they would come home after school and all of a sudden I became a taxi cab, and to be running everybody all over town, trying to juggle homework at one point I had one in high school, one in middle school, one in elementary school. So it's very different needs. And then you're supposed to put a meal on the table and try and figure out how you're going to feed everybody. And it just became a juggle. And so in addition to navigating these things for myself, I also discovered that my clients were navigating the same thing. And so it was sort of, self-protective. I was trying to find answers for myself that turned out to be solutions for other people as well.
Very cool. And I think it's amazing that you then shared that with others as well. Now, getting back to the pantry principle,
Mm-hmm.
what is, for those people that are just hearing about the pantry principle for the first time, what is the pantry principle?
So the pantry principle is about taking back your power to control what is in your pantry and what you feed your family. Understanding, as I said, it's not just what you eat, it's what's in what you eat. And then also learning to avoid the unbelievable amount of manipulation that food producers put out there when it comes to putting products on the shelves and ultimately, they hope, into our homes.
There's so much, as we've first met several years ago, learned so much from you at that time and from reading your book, just about ingredients and so many things that we just don't know what we don't know. During this COVID-19 health crisis, we know it's important to eat all the time, but especially during this COVID-19 crisis, why is it so important to eat healthy?
That is such a great question, because part of the challenge that we have is we don't often think about how we're nourishing our bodies. We think about how we're feeding our bodies. And the difference is nourishment means we're actually getting things that support a state of wellness. Nutrient dense foods that have protein and healthy fats and reasonably balanced carbs, foods that have a lot of micronutrients in them that provide phytonutrients and all these different things that are supportive for us. The challenge is anytime we're under stress, anytime we're bored, anytime we operate too close to the pantry, we tend to operate in snack mode. And there was a very interesting article that I saw recently that actually said part of the challenge right now is for so many people, because they're so stressed, when we're stressed, we release cortisol, we release all these other hormones that kind of overwhelm our brains a little bit, and we don't think as clearly. And so we're not necessarily making choices. We're like, oh, look, potato chips, oh, cookies, oh, whatever. And we think, well, I just need a snack. And if we stop instead and say, am I really hungry? So even just making that choice, if I am hungry, what can I eat that's going to be good for me? Let's be honest. I'm not here to say don't have any junk food. Like, I recognize right now we are seeking that comfort or whatever, but to make sure that you don't give into it, because part of the challenge is when we eat those foods that are not nourishing for us, we fail to provide amino acids and nutrients and other things that our body needs that are the building blocks for healthy lifestyle and healthy body. But then we also create this ripple effect that begins to impact our sleep, our energy levels, our mood, and then it just becomes like this downward spiral.
And that's something that that was part of your initial journey in this. Now, you
Mhm.
said something, I think, very important. I want to make sure everybody caught that. There's a distinction between eating just to eat, right, versus eating to fuel and nourish our body. I remember in going through nutrition class, our teacher, he was a big he was a nutrition guy. Right? He was the guru, but he showed a picture of a small boy who was malnourished. Right, it was very obvious that he wasn't getting a lot of food, skin and bones. And then he showed a picture of another child, same age, who was significantly overweight. And he asked the question, which one of these is malnourished? And everyone in the class was, of course, the skinny one. You can see his skin and bones. He's malnourished. And he said, well, actually, they're both malnourished. One has plenty of calories, but he's not getting the nourishment, nutrition he needs, and he's unhealthy. So you can be unhealthy and be underweight. You can be unhealthy and be overweight. So malnourished, we learned, really doesn't have to do with how much food you're eating or how much you weigh. It's based on the quality of the ingredients that you're consuming. And it sounds like that's what the pantry principle is about, is identifying quality ingredients to fuel your body. Is that right?
Well, it's about understanding what the negative ingredients are so you can remove those to then make room for the better quality ingredients.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I was years back at a conference, and one of the doctors said something that stood out in my mind ever since then. And I've shared it with patients ever since then. He said, we cannot medicate our way out of a lifestyle problem.
Mm,
We
yeah.
cannot medicate our way out of a lifestyle problem. Meaning, if we've developed problems and we don't even realize it's a lifestyle problem, we're consuming these foods. The commercials say, hey, Cheerios is going to lower my cholesterol, or if I eat this yogurt, it's going to give me all my probiotics and I'll have a healthy gut inside, and various other forms of marketing. We consume these foods. We drink vitamin water because we think that's all the vitamins that we need. So all these things we consume and not really understanding what's in them, and they can actually do more harm than good. Is that something you found?
Yeah, that is actually a really great point. Food producers are not really in the business of making food. They're in the business of making money. Food happens to be how they do it. And one of the biggest challenges that we have is they spend literally tens of millions of dollars to figure out what it is that will attract us to buy their product. So they use things like front of package labeling, which you just referred to, Cheerios, great for your cholesterol, lowers your cholesterol, and a yogurt has all this probiotic activity and everything else. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to convince you to not flip the label around, to actually look at the back of it and see what's in it. The other thing that happens is, because they spend so much money on this, they do a lot of research to figure out what is the latest and greatest thing. So I don't know if you remember, but a lot of years ago, it used to be that all of a sudden there were lots of things that were talking about how many whole grains were in everything and how many grams of fiber, because that was very important. Well, now it's all about protein. So they're talking about how much protein is in everything, and they're putting protein in things that don't normally have protein in them, because that's a hot spot. That's something that we're attracted to, and they're trying to capitalize on that.
So it
They
sounds
also,
like
oh, sorry, go ahead.
so it sounds like it's very much a buyer beware market,
Yeah.
where it's hard for anyone to really decipher what's healthy, what's not healthy. What is someone who's just getting into this, where they find themselves more at the grocery store, having to prepare breakfast, lunch, and dinner right now for their family, and they're just getting into the avenue of healthy eating, starting to look at labels. So what's a good action step for someone who's beginning this journey?
So one of the things that I'd love to do, I'm looking at my book right now to find the page. I would love to share my 7 simple rules for healthy grocery shopping with you.
Okay.
And, you know, I want to start by saying, it's not that I expect you to do all 7 of them at once, because that would be a little bit overwhelming and it would take you 5 hours at the grocery store. Nobody wants to do that. But if you pick one thing at a time, one of these things, and start with that, and then over time just add them in until you get to a point where you are unconsciously incorporating all of them, you will eliminate the vast majority of garbage food out of your pantry. So that's great. So the first one is, do you have to look it up? You know, my feeling is you should not need a degree in biochemistry in order to understand what's in your food. If you look at the ingredient panel and you see things and you're like, I don't know what that is, and you have to go looking for a dictionary, and believe it or not, there is a food ingredient dictionary out there, that is probably something you don't want. Number 2 is, does it have a number? And so my joke is that real food does not grow by numbers. There's no such thing as a carrot 64. There's no pineapple 7, like it just doesn't exist. So if it has a number, that is a really good indicator that it is some kind of a chemical concoction, and that's, the number is just the identifier of that formula. So anything that has a number in it, in the ingredient label, don't buy it. Does it have 4 or more syllables? And this is where you kind of have to think about it, because macadamia has 5, and we love macadamia nuts. They're delicious and they're good as a nice, healthy, you know, fat treat, but not too many of them, obviously. But the vast majority of, again, chemical names are polysyllabic. So we want to make sure that if it's got a lot of syllables, if you don't know what it is, check it out first before you buy it. Is it unpronounceable? If you, and again, this is one of those you have to think about, because when quinoa first came out, everybody was like, quinoa, quinoa, what is it? You know, but once we learned how to pronounce it, we knew that it's this, you know, high protein pseudo grain, and it's actually a really good choice for us. Then we knew that we could add it in. But in the beginning, if you don't know how to pronounce it, chances are you may want to investigate it further first. The next thing is, does it end in ATE? Another one you have to think about, because pomegranate ends in ATE, and those are really delicious and they have lots of health benefits for us. But so do sorbates, phthalates, nitrates, you know, all of those other foods. And so if it ends in ATE and it's not a whole food, you don't want to eat it. The next one is it enriched? And enriching is this very unusual process where they remove a lot of nutrients in processing, and they remove so many that the federal government told them they had to put some of them back. The biggest example of this tends to be in wheat-based products, where the wheat is so stripped and they are then required to put back B vitamins plus a little bit of iron. They remove, I believe it's 22 nutrients from wheat when they process it, and they only have to put back 5 when they enrich it. And I'm here to tell you that the versions that they put back are not natural versions, they're chemical analogs. Enriched products tend to be the first ingredient on a label. So if the first word you see is enriched, or if it's anywhere in the top 5, because it usually doesn't appear lower than that, but if it says enriched, don't buy it.
So that's almost counterintuitive, because if you see enriched, they make it sound like, hey, this is good, this is enriched, this is better, this is the best bread. But you're telling us enriched actually means we took everything out and we enriched it with some lower quality in supplements or vitamins. So stay away.
And didn't put them all back. Yeah. So what happened is, back in the post-war era, they were able to process flour rather, to make a bread that was so fine and so fluffy, you know, and our little lizard brain just loves fluffy, soft food. We just do. And things that convert to sugar really easily, like that, just gets us going. The problem is they removed so many nutrients that people got sick. And so that was why they had to put some nutrients back. People were getting ill from eating what was supposed to be like this refined, wonderful thing. And the truth is, what the peasants were eating, that dark, dense, rich, you know, whole grain thing that everybody was like, oh, I don't want that, I want the fluffy stuff. You know, they were actually getting more nutrition. So that was kind of a funny thing. Now, having said that, we generally don't recommend a lot of wheat products anyway, because all those grains can be very inflammatory to the gut. And so that's where you have to figure out if that works for you or not. But I'm here to tell you, whether you can or cannot eat those things, enriched is never a good idea.
Good tip.
And then the last one is it all capital letters and not real words? So BHT, BHA, TBHQ, EDTA, all of those are simply foreshortened ways of saying these really long chemical names that would take up a lot of space on the food label. So BHA, for example, is butylated hydroxyanisole. That's a lot of characters to squeeze on a food label, so they just put BHA. So if you see any of that, you don't want to buy that either. And what I can do is I will send you a copy of my food label, of my wallet card with that on it. And then you can share that with your people. We'll put a link to it down below in the video. And
Perfect.
yeah, and then that way they can see what they are, so nobody has to sit there and scribble really quickly.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, just pick one. Start with one. And then from there, once you're like, oh, I got this one's really easy, then pick another one and add that in, because everything that you do is one step more than you were doing before. And that's one step further on the journey to optimal wellness.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Yeah. We'll make sure we include that link for everyone watching this. You mentioned several of the books, and there's so many topics. I wish we had more time. We're almost out of time. So where can they buy some of those additional books or have access to those that you shared earlier about, like freezer meal planning? You talked about the sugar one. What's the best way to find those?
So the easiest way to find me is online at theingredientguru.com. So pretty easy. And then I am also on social media, like I'm on Facebook, Instagram, that kind of thing. And it's The Ingredient Guru. So.
Okay, excellent. And if you'll send me links to all of those, Facebook, your web channel, anything else, I'll make sure we include it. So that way those that are watching that say, okay, all right, I'm starting to read labels. And sometimes as you start to read them, you have more questions. As you start to get in this world, they'll be able to reach you. And if they want to send you a message, I imagine there's links on your webpage as well to contact
absolutely.
you.
Yep, you can reach me there, or you can also email me, Mira at theingredientguru.com.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much. That has just been a wealth of information that I'm hopeful will help all those who are listening today as they're at their grocery store more and more and more and start looking at labels. I really appreciate you having time today. For those of you listening, take action, just one small step. Like she mentioned, don't try to do all 7. You may be able to say, gosh, I'm already doing 2 of those, so you can add a 3rd one. But wherever you're at, just take action, not tomorrow, but today. So often we'll say, gosh, if I only had more time, I'd love to be able to cook or eat healthier. If I only had the time, I'd be able to read the labels and get better quality food for my family. Right now, we have the time. So develop healthy habits that will help improve your health now, as well as set the foundation for weeks, months, and years ahead. Whether it's through your diet, whether it's through exercise, our clinic remains open. Your health is essential. We are an essential healthcare provider. And so whether it's inflammatory diseases from food or some of the inflammation may be due from arthritis, neuropathy, or other pain-based conditions, we remain here to help our patients get out of pain, get off pain medications such as anti-inflammatories and other similar ones, and be able to help them get as healthy as possible any time of the year, but especially during this COVID-19, we need to make sure everyone in our community is as healthy as possible. That way, whenever they are exposed to this in the future, they have the best chance of being able to fight this virus off and come out victorious. So thank you everybody for watching in today. Thank you again, Mira, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday.
Thanks for having me on. Bye.